Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of DIB Innovators. Today I'm speaking with Todd Stirtzinger, CEO of Galvion. Todd, thanks for joining.
David, thanks for having me. Excited about our conversation.
This can be great. You guys are doing some amazing things, and so I'm excited to dig into that a little bit deeper. But before we do that, give me a little bit about your journey. How did you find yourself as CEO of a multinational corporation, if you will?
Sure. But first, I'd like to thank you for your service. I know you were a career officer in the Air Force, and I really appreciate that. I never served, so I'm always very appreciative of those who served our nation. And sounds like you're still doing it with some of your venues. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And as you are serving, you're bringing capability of warfighter that's making a difference. So that's important. But
Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel that way. Yeah, I don't think my journey is a whole lot different than most. You're young, you're trying to figure out, what profession you want to be in. And I had a couple of inflection points that maybe I would focus on. The first one was I dropped out of college after 2 years. I thought, I don't need formal education. I was fortunate enough to get into a retail management kind of executive leadership program. And at 23, I was running a retail store in the building supply industry where I lived locally. And I thought, geez, that's the cat's meow. I'm in 23, I'm running a retail store. And certainly I smartened up 3 or 4 years later and knew that formal education was important. But what I took away from that, particularly at 23 when you're very impressionable, your people skills get honed when you're working with the general public. So my people skills were honed, and I really had gotten a value for the human psychology. Maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but now that I look back, I think that was really good initial training for me. And so, like anything, I had to get a 9 to 5-ish kind of job so I could go back and get my educational aspirations fulfilled. And I landed in the defense industry. It's just what happened. I landed with a company that's now known as Leonardo DRS. So I stayed with them for 20 plus years. It wasn't called that at the time. We were acquired by DRS 7 years into my 20-year tenure. And I started at the back door, shipping and receiving in stockroom. I was the manager because I had management skills, but I had no other skills. I got all my education at night and just advanced my way through the company and ultimately became a general manager running a division. And then at the end, a sector president. We focused on electro-optical infrared systems for the defense industry. So things that went on the Apache helicopter, M1 tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, Humvees, MRAPs, and then ultimately thermal weapon sights on the actual weapon for the dismount. And so I was around a lot of high-tech people, a lot of technology and engineering, all the way down to the focal plane arrays that go into infrared systems. And that was great learning for me. But after 20 years, I thought, geez, I want to be a CEO. And I had an opportunity to join a small company outside of defense, commercial industry, Japanese owned, a division in the US. We made custom computers and displays for medical devices. Of course, I'd learned a lot there that I really wasn't ready to be a CEO, but also working for commercial companies, it's different than defense. You have to be much more aggressive, kind of eat what you kill. And working for a foreign owner was good. And I remember the day my wife and I went to the movies and we saw Lone Survivor. I'm sure most of you and your listeners have seen that, the 4 Navy SEALs that got dropped into Afghanistan and ultimately ambushed with one survivor. I walked out of that theater. I looked at my wife and I said, I have to get back into the defense industry. I mean, what we were doing was great with medical devices, but nothing gets into your blood, nothing gets your juices flowing than making product for the men and women who wear the uniform and serve our nation. And so I landed at L3. I ran their soldier systems business up in New Hampshire. And for those 5 years, I think I really then fell in love with putting product on the dismounted soldier, the boots on the ground, men and women in uniform. I mean, we all do great things in the defense industry and they all help lethality and survivability. But when you have to put it on the person, boy, it gets real personal. And when you think about getting home safe to your family, it just puts another premium on the things that we were providing that. And that's how I landed at Galvion. That's all we think about is the individual dismounted warfighter.
yeah, that's very cool. And your journey, you hear about those every once in a while, but it's so great. So, your commitment and discipline to do that, I applaud you. And I agree with you. I think one of the hardest things for folks is, emotional intelligence or being able to, your people skills, the soft skills, because there aren't really training programs. You can get domain experience working in a company, but tell me some of the biggest lessons you learned in working with people throughout your journey now that you're the CEO. Like what are some of those early lessons that you're really hanging on to?
Well, first, I learned I was never the smartest person in the room, and I always wanted to make sure that was true going forward. Because it's really about how do you put a good team together? It's like a baseball team or a hockey team, whatever your sport is that you follow. You can't have all A players at all times. You have to be able to assemble a team that has A, B, C players on it and then get the best out of that. So the biggest thing I learned is it's not one tool that works for every individual. You have to learn what makes each person tick, and then you have to hone your skills and into that person. And that requires, yeah, maybe emotional intelligence, but it requires a lot of listening. It requires empathy, being able to put yourself in their shoes. Because, leaders can be stern without being abrupt. They can be stern without being, difficult leaders, and just hold people accountable and be empathetic and be willing to do whatever they're doing. And I think that's a great recipe for leadership.
Yeah, I think that is you, because a lot of times you see, type A, very successful, maybe even like, let's say tech or product people that are raised in the ranks, which happens a lot in the defense, right?
Sure.
They don't always have that perspective because it's all about for delivering on time, on target, and so that is a big skill that I think is important, and not being the smartest guy in the room is really resonates with me.
Well, yeah, I'm saying that by default, I never am anyway. So you might as well take advantage of it, right? And make a career out of it.
Yeah, that's right, for sure. So you've led, these defense companies, or been part of the leadership team going through transformations. If you were to think back of, we all have leaders that we aspire to be, and then leaders that are notable because they're not ones we want to follow or ever do their mistakes. What do you think the one biggest mistake you've seen from leadership or leaders you've had that you've seen multiple times, repeated over time?
I always say, David, that there's three stakeholders in every decision you make as a business leader. There's the shareholders, whoever that might be. There are the customers, and there are the employees. And the biggest mistakes I think I've seen is when there's been too much focus on the shareholders and not enough focus on the other two stakeholders, which are customers and employees. And I truly believe this, and I've seen it work. If you have satisfied customers, that means you're doing something right. If you're doing something right, you probably have satisfied employees, but if you focus on their career and their development, then you've got a satisfied workforce. And the shareholders will be taken care of in those situations because you'll get repeat business, you'll have good recruiting skills. So I think the biggest lesson out of that is stay focused on the right stakeholders. Don't worry about the shareholders. And easy for me to say because I haven't been a CEO of a public company yet when there's that pressure to report earnings every quarter. But if you can stay more focused on those other two stakeholders and not the shareholders, I think things work out much better in the long run.
You still have a board. I mean, you've got there are people you're accountable to, so that is an important distinction. Yeah, we have similar. We're focused and we're about customer love. You know,
Sure.
we actually, first launched our product on Valentine's Day to align with that.
Oh, how cool.
Because if you can have, great customer satisfaction, and they, you know, we're a cybersecurity. I just share this 'cause I think it's funny, but it segues in here. Cybersecurity company. I don't know of many CEOs that like have personal relationships and call when they come into town for a beverage. But that's the kind of relationships we have with our customers, because that's that type of partnership that we find. And to your point, you do that, your employees feel that, and they're a part of that, and they deliver that, and so that is super important. The board, yeah, you have to deliver, you have to produce results, but if you're doing those things, that becomes a lot easier. So
I think so. And when I worked for L3, we were, I don't know, mid-tier manufacturer, but big, right? L3 was in the billions, and I was just running one piece of the business. I didn't care if it was, chief master sergeant or colonel, lieutenant colonel, all the way up to a four-star general. If I could meet with a customer and have intimacy with that customer and understand what their demands and needs are, then I did it because I think it was most important. And you just have to take off the suit and tie and just be a human being and do what's right.
yeah, I appreciate that sentiment for sure. So in, one statement, or, one sentence, two sentences, tell me what Galvion does, your mission, and what problems or what pain points are you trying to solve for your customer?
Sure, appreciate that. Galvion, I think our ethos is really right in our vision statement, and it was derived 5 years ago when we rebranded Galvion. Just a brief history, company goes back 25 years. Founder developed it or founded it in 2002, known as Revision Military. So some of your listeners might have known Revision Military, became the number one brand in ballistic protection eyewear in the industry. But over the years, through some acquisitions, he decided to divest the eyewear and divested the name with it and created Galvion, which came up from two words because we had helmet protection and power and data in our portfolio after those divestitures for galvanized, which is the helmet, and ion, which is, certainly the electronics. And there was born Galvion. And they rebranded and they created a new vision and mission. And our vision statement is to give the most demanding military and tactical teams integrated solutions that allow them to go beyond what they thought possible. And that's where we start. When you think of Galvion, you should think of a human being because we put them at the center of every design we do. As an example, a helmet has to be ballistically protected. It has to sit on the head and take hits. But we don't care about that. That's table stakes. What we care about is how is that helmet going to interact with the human being? Is that helmet going to be stable, comfortable? Are they going to be able to put night vision goggles on it, flashlights, beacons, sensors, and still be able to perform, turn a 1.5, 2 pound helmet into a 5 pound Christmas tree on somebody's head? The center of gravity has to be right. The stability has to be right. The comfort has to be right. So if we can solve the human to our product problem before we solve anything else, that's what I want people to know about Galvion is the human is in the center of everything we do in our product designs.
And so really you're focused on the warrior in the battlefield. And how much of that, you talk about a helmet. A lot of people think of a helmet like a football helmet, yeah, it does a couple things. Yeah, you can put a couple attachments, but technology advances, and we've seen it in all the movies, really start to create networks upon networks of information sharing. How do you at Galvion fit that into what seems to be a very simple but very important, piece of equipment?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's a problem we're trying to solve every day. When I joined Galvion, I'd been in electro-optical infrared my whole career. I'm thinking helmets. They can't they can't possibly be that technical. Well, there is. There's a ton of engineering, and as you said, the advancements in the material used to have. Gosh, back in Vietnam, they had metal helmets. Then they went to Kevlar, which is very heavy, and now everything is polyethylene or plastic. And the science behind actually creating the patterns and pressing those in 500-ton presses to create the shape and it being ballistically protecting whatever ballistics you're trying to protect against. There's a lot of science behind that. But, more to your question, we always called it a head system. We never called it a helmet, even before it was, vogue to do so, because it's about what gets attached. And as you think about the digitally connected battlefield, that's the next problem we're solving with our head systems. We have some very advanced integrated head systems that take a basic helmet, adds integrated power, adds compute on the head, and now you're a connection, you're a node in the network. So that's solve one. Solve two is what do you do with that? How do you connect with all this ecosystem of equipment? And then how do you, if you can connect with this ecosystem, how do you get that information into the digestible chunks so a warfighter can actually, the dismounted squad leader or whoever can get that data quickly, fast, efficiently, and make decisions? That's the big picture problem. And we're attacking that in many different directions that I'm super excited to talk about on this call.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about that a little bit. So of your products, what's your marquee product, if you will, and, which sounds like it's the helmet, but what other pieces to that? And then as you break your company apart, what specific technologies are you focused on to bring that capability set to the warfighter and network them into the digital battlefield?
So real high level, head systems are our largest portfolio, and they range anywhere from a passive protective device, a helmet, like we talked about, all the way to
I do apologize for keep calling it a helmet.
no, no, no. Everybody does. Everybody does. We'll change the paradigm eventually, so don't worry about that. It is a helmet, but anywhere from a basic helmet all the way to these advanced head systems. But we also have a power and data portfolio, which basically we have wearable on-the-body power delivery, so devices that give power to the individual warfighter, which is a huge problem and continues to be as we get more digitally connected. But it also does power management, intelligent power management. Some of our devices, we can scavenge power from anywhere and recharge things. And then, of course, we have a whole ecosystem of power and data equipment to move power and data around the body. And then our third portfolio, which is our most advanced, the one that's developing the most, is this integrated soldier systems. And that's where we're talking about how do you take a digitally connected battlefield and make it meaningful. And that gives us the benefit of both our head systems experience and our power and data portfolio, add open architecture software. And now you have truly a head system that can be connected into this ecosystem. And the open system architecture is the most important part. I've worked for a lot of companies that end up giving the government vendor lock solutions, and that's not us. We just happen to own the real estate that's probably most important for the human, the head, because all the inputs either come into the ears or the eyes for a human to make decisions. So we're right there. So we're starting to expand our portfolio both in visual augmentation systems and potentially also, I don't get too far ahead on our skis because this is somewhat proprietary, but we're getting a little bit into the comms as well. And because once you look, we're not going to get to the tactical network. We're not going to go create that. That exists today. But the information ends up on the soldier, either a tactical radio or an EUD. Once it gets on the soldier, that's where our value starts. Think of the OODA loop. A lot of people have heard of the OODA loop, right? Observe, orient, decide, act. AI, machine learning, that's going to help a lot with observe and orient, maybe a little bit on decide, but we start with decide and act. Once you get that data, what do you do with it and how do you make it useful?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to frame that. When you look at the capability set, so let's just talk about innovation. It's often hard working with a government, at least I'd say old school. Here are our requirements, go build this widget. But technology is advancing so fast. I'm sure you're a piece of this where, what the capabilities are before the customer could even put in the requirement because you're the ones that are figuring this out. How do you kind of work through that iteration of this is potentially a capability, make that investment, and understanding that the warfighter may want it, but they may not, and is it really providing value? Like how does that whole innovative process, do you hold that within your company and drive through?
Yeah, there's no prescribed recipe. If there was, everybody would do it and it would be so much easier. I think the one thing that, because we put the human at the center of every design, we value user input. And so as we start iterating some innovation, something we think is interesting ahead of the curve in the market, first thing we do is gen up prototypes and get out in front of users that we have intimacy with, whether it's special operators or, we have over 2 million helmets installed in Europe. So we've got relationships with every country, every NATO country, and particularly some very advanced technically acting countries like up in Scandinavia. So we get out in front of them and say, what do you think? And we start iterating. I mean, our advanced integrated head systems that we're getting ready to launch at Soft Week this year, and we did a soft launch last year called Cortex. That's 4 years in the making. So you ask, how do you make those decisions? User feedback is number one, and we often have to course correct because our users give us either something that we didn't think about or tell us that that's way off. And then the other thing is it's critically important as a small company that we get it right. We don't have, everybody knows Anduril. Everybody knows the mid-tier companies like L3 and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. Everybody knows those companies that have a little bigger treasury than we do as a small 500 employee company. So for us to get it right is critically important. And that's why we think the user feedback is key. Ultimately, you'll end up in a requirement if it bubbles up from the bottom. Now, traditionally in the US, you'd go to the schoolhouses and you try to get all your requirements written in there. Because we're a global company and our focus has been mostly in Europe, it's a much easier, I think it's an easier path to get intimate and get that information from the users. But we just won 2 critical programs in the US for helmets on the US Marine Corps and the FBI, DEA. And I think, again, some of those lessons learned over in Europe, we used for those 2 wins just to get early. It took us 4 years to win the US Marine Corps program. And when we went through 3 user trials. And I think just, again, being intimate with the customer and listening to everything they say and making changes based on their feedback, you don't get that from the bigger companies.
Yeah. Yeah. Being responsive to user requests. Talk to me a little bit about, I'll go back to the Europe side a little bit, but what were the, what did you deliver or contract with the Marines and, our agencies? Like what was that? And what are the coolest advances that you think really set you apart from your competitors?
So they're both helmet systems or head systems. The one with the U.S. Marine Corps also has some integrated power requirements that are a subset of that. With the U.S. Marine Corps, they were we like to say it was designed by the Marines, but built by Galvion. So again, we listened to everything they needed, and they have very specific equipment they field with. They have night vision goggles that are very specific, and they have over-the-ear comms that are very specific. And they wanted to ensure that these helmets, which were going to be next generation helmets, worked well with that equipment. So our competitor had the same opportunity, but I think again, our intimacy and our listening helped. At the same time, though, we're thinking about what do the Marine Corps need next for that system? And we already are working on some advanced, like we talked about, being connected to the digital battlefield. So we also showed them the path of upgrade that this helmet could. This could be helmets last 10 years. So we know technology moved faster than 10 years. So we wanted to ensure that they had visibility to what we were thinking in some of those advancements. Same with FBI, DEA. Both of those came down to user trials, and almost I would say we're probably in the high 90%. If user trials are part of an evaluation, we generally win, because I do believe we have the most stable, the most comfortable, the most engineered helmet on the market at an affordable price. And, but, I don't think there's any secrets there. It's just a matter of listening to your customer, giving them what they need.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's great for a smaller company to, get that kind of foothold, taking care of the warfighters. Pivot over to Europe. So obviously with anyone building technology or capability sets, finding, we call them pilot customers or partners, is important, until it's cool that Europe's doing that. How have you seen the conflict in Ukraine, or, there are probably others that you've used, we were able to get, real combat feedback in those situations?
Yeah, as you know, there are two conflicts going on over there, and one hopefully is almost resolved. When we deploy into those war zones, we get, because of our intimacy, I was shocked, quite frankly. I'm coming from bigger companies. When our engineers can get text from somebody that's actually deployed and showing them a helmet that just saved their life or their buddy, and send pictures of things that were shot, that's pretty amazing.
That's customer love right there.
That is customer love. We didn't do a lot. We did deploy some to Ukraine. We didn't get a lot of feedback. There's a lot of lessons learned people are talking about in Ukraine that are applying to some of our other capabilities, like the whole UAV, manned, unmanned teaming situation. But I think the important thing is, if you have the intimacy, you're going to get the direct feedback from those conflicts. And yes, you will spin your technology and your innovation based on what you learn. Both of those cases were head systems, but we also had some power systems in one of those conflicts. And power is a problem. Power is a big problem, particularly as you get more and more robots on the battlefield. Keeping those charged and keeping those moving is going to be critically important.
Let's talk about power then. Are you researching and innovating in how power is delivered down to like the battery design? Are you partnering with folks to do that, and just figuring out better ways to get the latest, I'll say, off the shelf technology in batteries or in power storage, and just figuring out better ways to deliver that power so it lasts longer and be able to be worn on the body easier? Or like, where do you sit in that power innovation
Yeah,
realm?
great question. And we're not down inventing the technology. There are plenty of people inventing what's the next cell technology, for instance. Most of our look in this now warfighter, everything's by battery. So the more you operate, the more you chew up those batteries. We are teamed and partnered with a couple we announced one of them called South 8. South 8 has a lithium gas as opposed to lithium ion chemistry in their cells. There's some advantage for extremely cold weather. And the Arctic is becoming a little more important in all of our doctrines. So we team with them so we can get something that's more all weather. Batteries get chewed up quickly in cold weather, but it also is its combustion rate is very low. So if it does get hit by ammunition, it doesn't create danger to the person that has it. So mostly teaming. We also teamed with a company, we announced this, out of Montreal, called Quays, and they have wireless transfer of power, that we think their technology is much different than what you see on your cell phone. I'm sure you've been frustrated by having to orient your phone just right on one of those Qi chargers. This is done more through, I'll call it radio waves, but we can have a receiver in the back of a seat, and the transmitter back of the seat, and the receiver on the soldier's load carriage, and they could sit there and be charged while they're being transported somewhere. Or you could have a drone land on it, be charged, and then continue. So we're partnering with folks, and then we figure out how to take that technology and create a product that solves the mission problem and get it delivered and manages the power the best that we can.
Yeah, it seems like managing power would be important there too. How it's delivered, at what level, and then when to pull it back, and just that whole piece of it.
Yeah, we have a software called Nerve Center. Anybody goes to our website can see that, and that's all about power management. It can give you the health of everything that's connected to whatever the device, the Galvion device that has that Nerve Center software in it, which all of our devices do. It can also help you with some mission planning. You can come off your mission. We have one product, Squad Power Manager. You come off your mission, you plug all your kit in, and you can tell it at what priority you want things charged. Give me my night vision goggle first. Give me my GPS device second. Or it'll just do everything at once. It will, and you can take the power from AC, you could alligator clip batteries, you could take it from any power source, a DeWalt power tool battery. It'll condition it, it'll charge it, but it also records all of that. So after a few missions, you could, if you know you're going on a similar mission, you can go see what your power draw was for each of your pieces of equipment. And maybe you take less batteries, less weight. So managing power, scavenging power, and getting it delivered at the right time to the right devices on a dismounted warfighter is pretty important. I think we do that really well.
Yeah, that's great. When you have, maybe it's power, but there is all this technology. What's the biggest design challenge in creating, again, I apologize, your helmet, you know, but to do all this, the integrated battlefield, like where are you spending, most of your cycles trying to innovate around roadblocks or just challenges in that, engineering challenge, hard engineering challenge? Where is that?
Great segue. We're very proud of our warfighter lab. And if you ever make your way, looks like you're in beautiful sun,
Boulder, Colorado.
where the sun shines all the time. If you ever make your way to the Northeast into Portsmouth, New Hampshire, we have a warfighter lab that we have invested millions in over the last 4 years. It is basically a full reality, mixed reality, virtual reality lab. It has high-speed cameras. It's got a configurable shoot house. It's got obstacles. It's got a 2D firing range. We use airsoft weapons. We use all the things that simulate, I'll say, a real battlefield. We've had special operators run through our configurable shoot house. And that's where we spend a lot of time when you think about a digitally enabled battlefield. Now, we use it for basic designs. As an example, if you're going to put a helmet on and you're going to throw night vision goggles down and you're going to go run through some obstacles at night, that's a 40-degree field of view. In that 40-degree field of view, you want to make sure it's in front of your eye box as much as possible. Well, how stable is that helmet and how much bounce do you get as you're running through obstacles? We have a double PhD cognitive scientist that runs this lab. Our high-speed cameras, we hook everything up. We can, if you were to run through this, we could tell where your eyes are looking, where your head's located, where the goggles are located, and where the helmets are located. We'd run you through some obstacles, and we would see all of that scientific measurements all the way down to the decimal. And you would be amazed at very well-trained special operators. We have them run through the obstacle course. We look at all their muscle movements and how free they moved with their weapon and so forth as they go through the shoot house. Turn off the lights, do the night vision goggles, do the same thing. And the body compensation is amazing. How much they compensate so they can keep, a 40-degree field of view in your eye box at all times. And you ask them afterwards when you survey them, how'd it feel? How'd that helmet, was it comfortable? Was it stable? It was perfect, man. It was great. I could do the obstacle course just as good as I could do it without it. And then you would show them the scientific data behind it, that you were slower, your muscles were tighter, you didn't move as freely, which is all human nature. But it allows us now to put science behind what we're designing, and our engineers can go, okay, if I can just tighten that chin strap a little bit more, if I could change the padding system and make it just a little more stable, because we saw a big movement, milliradians, but we saw the movement between the goggle and the helmet. I can tighten my mount that the goggle's mounted to. So that's first order use of that warfighter lab. But the second thing is we can throw you in virtual reality and immerse you into, hey, I'll give you an example. We had a special customer that was getting a sniper who had a digital weapon sight, was also flying a drone downrange, getting the feed from the drone through their digital weapon sight with buttonology on the digital weapon sight to control the drone. So the sniper never had to take their eye off of their target area. But you can't just go fly drones everywhere. And they were trying to solve the problem of, where do I want the menu structure? Where do I want the drone feed? How do I want my buttonology? And we mocked that up in VR and actually had the drone flying in VR. We mocked up all the movements of the drone, but the weapon sight was real. We mocked up the weapon sight. We put it on an airsoft weapon. Everything else about their system was exactly like they would use it, except for the drone was in VR. And that informed them and how they could change their design for buttonology, menu structure, where do I put the drone feed in the screen? And so as we create our advanced digital helmets and we start putting heads up displays in front of our helmets, which we do, we can really iterate all of that in as much real time as we can in that warfighter lab, and it really inform both us and our users about how do you get all this information to the warfighter without cognitive overload. When do I want my screen clear? When do I want that drone feed? When do I want the weapon sight feed? When do I want my navigation map, my compass? All those things are all things that we can iterate real time in that lab and have our engineers make really good design change choices.
I love that. I mean, we partner with a bunch of AR, VR companies. Did you develop the AR? I'm just curious about your warfighting house, if you will. Is that all your tech, or are you partnering with folks to bring in that tech and then integrating, your capability sets into it?
Well, we're using, I'll say, standard analytical tools that are used with high speed cameras, but we completely designed the whole lab. The VR we use, that can change over time, but we're coding in all the scenarios. We're coding in the movements of the robots. We're coding in, bad guy, good guys through the shoot house. The difference about ours is if you've ever put on VR goggles and you're in an open room, you see things and it does trick your mind a little bit. But if you're a trained operator, you're in an open room. You're just gonna, you're not going to be as free. You're going to be less tenuous. We take our configurable shoot house and we actually program that into VR. So when you're going through that shoot house in complete VR, if there's a door, there's a door. If there's a window, there's a window. If there's a wall, you feel the wall. And that's a little bit different, I think, that because what we're trying to do is simulate as much as we can reality, because otherwise the data is not as meaningful that we collect with our cognitive scientists. And we're looking at muscle movement and, again, performance, cognitive overload, the more real you can make it with 3D sound and all of that, which is what we do, I think the more your information is valuable.
I'm gonna come up and do that. We're gonna run it.
You really should. Lot to do it.
That sounds amazing. 2 questions, because I think these are, we got a lot of podcast guests and just customers we have. Do you bring in biometrics through like Aura Ring or different, Garmin or, things like that? Do you bring any of that into this, like, so to make it more visible or to the warfighter through your systems?
So if you can get the information on the body, we can bring it up. Have we done that? We have connected to a smartwatch. I mean, I think it had some biometrics in it. That wasn't the main purpose. But the things we have connected to are UAVs for UAV fees, a couple different suppliers of night vision goggles, a digital weapon sight, GPS, the EUD, the Samsung EUD, which brings all the tactical network up in ATAC. But the short answer is yes. If you can get the information onto the body, we can connect either wireless or wired. So we can go through Bluetooth, we can go through 4G, 5G, or we can go wired itself. And then, of course, the U.S. Army has an intra-soldier wireless protocol. All of those are means for us to get information up to the head.
I guess open system architecture helps. I'm not sure there's a use case for it. I was just curious.
No, there is. That's becoming more important. Sensors in the helmet for, trauma. How much trauma did we impact? That information is now being utilized in some militaries, and they're actually putting, I would say, the safety of the individual warfighter at a higher premium than they have in the past.
How about, is there and I just don't know, because, flying jets, we had helmets and displays and different things. like to have kind of a gyroscopic stabilizer in the helmet, or is that actually not what you want because you want it exactly where the head is? You know, have you guys, is that technology or is that something just out of curiosity?
You do have you do put IMUs into your system so you know where you are located and relevant to your space. Because you need to know if you're gonna project augmented reality into your system and you're gonna project compass headings, or you're gonna project the blue force, red force tracking, and, where buildings might be, you have to know where you are, so you use an IMU for that. You're not trying to compensate for that. That would be in the visual augmentation system that you might be using, might have some algorithms to compensate for movement. But for the most part, you're using IMUs just so you know where you're located in space.
Just
Yeah.
accurately knowing where you are.
Yeah. And you use the F-35. I am convinced, I've said this all along, that what the fighter pilot has with the F-35 is the ground pounder is going to have it someday. Think of Tony Stark and Iron Man. Those two universes are going to collide, and getting information to that dismounted warfighter as quick as possible and in sound bites as possible so they can make quick decisions and maybe even control drones and things like that. We're heading in that trajectory. The question is, when do those worlds meet, and when are we that advanced for the dismounted warfighter?
Yep. So just curious then, as you work with such a broad customer base, I think you're in over 100 countries, working with folks. How do you see different, military forces, prioritize, the soldier effectiveness? Is there a broad difference in how they view that and how they pursue capability sets, or is it all pretty standard?
Certainly the US is forward leaning technically. Maybe as some of our Five Eyes partners, the UK, and probably is right there with us in Australia, and some of your NATO countries aren't too far behind. I would say for our product base, they put a premium on performance. And what I mean by that, and I don't want to disparage any US forces because that's not what this is intended to do. Take ballistic properties of a helmet. There's only a handful of forces around the world that are concerned about the latest threat from a rifle projectile. There's only a few. Most of them will give up some of that protection and just want to be protected from, say, 9mm frag, so you can reduce the weight of the helmet, increase the performance of the individual wearing it, and then put more capability on the head without a weight penalty. I think in the end, we're all moving in this trajectory, even in the US. Maybe they move at a different pace because the Army is so big, but we're moving into the trajectory of information is almost as important as being protected, and being not seen, being not hit, being not where the threat is equally as important as being protected from the threat. And I think it's to the point where that's going to become more important, and we'll give up some of that weight, we'll give up some of that protection just to not be where we shouldn't be and to be more decisive, and then use other things like drones and hypersonic missiles and long range fires to fight the battle. People often thought 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the ground forces would go away. Why do you ever need ground forces? We can fight from the sea, we can fight from the air, we can fight from space. Well, we had some recent events. If you want to occupy a country, you got to have boots on the ground. So in the end, and then you got Putin with what he did, right? So in the end, not being in harm's way and being informed is probably taking a priority. And you see that being adopted a little bit, in my mind, my opinion, a little bit faster in the NATO countries than you are back here in North America.
Yeah, offense versus defense, but oh, football defense wins championships, but protecting yourself, if they can't see where you are, F-22, F-35, that really changes the game. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, what capability, where do you think this is going to be in 5 to 10 years? Like, where are we looking at? Where's this going?
I think the area that will be most proliferated, but I'm not sure we know how, I'm not sure anybody else knows how yet, is certainly the AI machine learning is going to continue to be part of how we fight battles. But I think most importantly, it's going to be just, I mean, the soldiers that are growing up today grew up on video games, grew up in front of an iPhone. We're soon going to retire out all of the warfighters that are the, old school like me, even though I didn't fight, grew up with the older technology. And I don't want to liken it to a video game or a computer game because there's too many high stakes there, but robots on the battlefield, machine human teaming, digital connectivity, speed of decisions. That's where we're moving. You still need force on force. You still need tanks. You still need ships. But when you're talking about humans, which is who we serve, the human, I think we're going to see dramatic changes because of those areas of technology. And I don't think I don't think any nation has that path yet. They're defining as they understand how valuable robot man teaming can be and how valuable AI and machine learning can be. I think we still have a lot of road ahead of us before we know exactly how that's going to change the doctrine on the battlefield, but that's the direction we're headed.
Yeah, really shrink the OODA loop, observe and orient. That stuff, that used to be the biggest problem, right? Fog and friction, but if more you can continually reduce that. So you're working with Musk, right, on his Neuralink? They could incorporate that.
We are not.
This is so, I mean, I could sit here, we could talk all day.
Yeah, okay. It's a great topic.
We got to start wrapping this up. I'm going to do a quick lightning round. Give me 30 seconds to a minute. Spicy, not thoughtfulness, just whatever comes to your mind. Give me what you think. So 5 questions. What's the biggest myth, misconception about selling to the DoD?
That the requirement has to be written before you can sell it.
Hardest lesson you've learned in building defense companies?
Speed. You can't have speed with too much bureaucracy.
Okay. Number 1 piece of advice you would give someone, trying to start a defense tech company?
You're solving problems. Listen to your customer. Don't try to produce something that doesn't solve a problem.
What's the most overrated use of AI in defense right now, and why will it disappoint?
That's a great question. I don't have a lot of exposure to what's going on in defense with AI. I'm not sure I can answer that very well.
Fair enough. And what do you think is the biggest opportunity in defense right now?
I think the biggest opportunity in defense is unmanned man teaming, human to machine teaming, I think is the biggest opportunity. I think one of our generals said the first blood on a battlefield, it's going to be a shame if it's a human.
Yeah. Well, that was great. Thanks. Fantastic. We're going to have to wrap it up, but we'll definitely stay in touch. I would like to get out there and run that through with you, run through your battle labs. That would be cool. But if folks want to follow what you're doing, reach out for whatever reason, how best do they get in touch with you?
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Shoot me a LinkedIn and I'll answer. I answer all my messages. Galvion.com, and you can get into the portal to our Marcom team, and they can also get a hold of me as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And we'll see you around the block.
Thanks, David. I enjoyed it.